Welcome back to Fashionably Awkward podcast. Hope everyone is having a lovely day today. We are joined by amazing guest Corii Burns, all the way from New York. Hi, Corii. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive into today's interview, we would like to introduce Corii and her luxury sustainable fashion brand Corii Burns. Corii is an American designer based in New York and Paris. She studied in IFA Paris. Her deconstructed tailoring with an inclusive vision for the future of sustainable fashion is inspiring, as well as her innovative perspective on upcycling, low waste direction, usage of deadstock fabric in pre-loved garment, creating an ethical and out-of-box fashion.
Her brand Corii Burns is a luxury deconstructed brand that focuses on diversity, socioeconomics, and sustainability as a catalyst for social change through fashion. Her collection is inspired and designed to highlight the diversity in the Black community and continues to effort to improve equality and inclusion. Corii, it's an amazing journey that you have been on with your sustainable brand with such a distinct visual identity. We are so excited to know more about your brand today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to share.
Great, great. So, with this, let's start with the interview. We would first
Okay.
like to know what really inspired you to start your own brand.
Definitely. So I would have to say it was definitely a few different things. The first thing would be during my middle school time, I started with sculpture. So you'll see that in a lot of my pieces. You'll see sculpture in the shoulders, rather it be a form. That was always really big for me. So in high school, I actually used to make dresses, mini little dresses out of plaster, clay, wire, glass, because I had a 3D class.
Oh,
And one day, I just always loved the art. So I did have a 3D class in high school. And as I was making these dresses out of everything but fabric, my art teacher, Miss Capria Lazaro, she just reached over one day and was like, you know, you can make that out of fabric, right? And I was just like, oh my gosh. And that was the aha moment for me. But even at that moment, I didn't start using fabric. But later on, when I did go to my undergraduate at Casanova College or university, I did start to play around with fabric, and I took fashion design as a minor. Halfway through having business management, specialization in accounting as my major, I added fashion design as a major as well. So I had the dual. And during that time, I started branching outside of school and doing shows and really got inspired. And in my first or my sophomore year, that's when I actually started my brand. It was a different name then, and it's grown to be Corii Burns,
all right.
which is my childhood nickname. So yeah.
Oh, very interesting. And
Thank you.
inspiring also at the same time that since
Thank
such a
you.
young age you had this vision. Although there were a few guidance in the process that help you to finally come up to with your brand. So as we know that deconstruction and upcycling are the core of your brand, how has it inspired you to create more sustainably?
Definitely. So before going to Paris, I recently graduated this past May from IFA Paris with my master's in contemporary fashion design. Going to Paris, I must say, it really was an eye-opener in terms of sustainability and how fashion is being pushed forward in Paris. I believe Paris is one of the centers where it spreads. So it starts there and it
Yeah.
spreads. So I think starting there with upcycling, deconstruction, and the professors that are there, it really opened my eyes. I was doing a little bit of sustainability before, but it became more focused and driven. And the only sole answer after graduating and actually going through that process and seeing the effects. So I knew a little bit about sustainability before going for my master's, but I think going there, I was really inspired by the upcycling that's being done in Paris and all throughout Europe. And I think that definitely bled over into my brand.
Oh, that's really interesting how like culture of a certain place, inspires you to take inspiration from them and create something of your own. So that's an interesting journey
Definitely.
that you have been on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's
So
very interesting.
yeah, so with that we would also love to know like how does your designing process work like? Like how is it?
Definitely. So my design process is quite lengthy. So for my last collection, it literally took me 1.5 to 2 years to complete. From
That's
start to finish.
Yeah, it's very long.
Yeah, this was my rebranding collection and introducing the more sustainable brand. So I wanted to have all my I's dotted and T's crossed.
Right.
So it was really important for me to take my time and to do it correctly or to my best knowledge.
Makes sense.
So, So to answer your question, how does my design process look? So it's very intense. So I start with research. I always start with research. I think it's so important to understand what I'm going to be saying to the audience, because then after all my collections, I always get questions after the show.
Right.
So if I'm picking something like, for example, mental health, and then I pick the stages to display that, and when someone comes up to me, I want to know. I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist. I took psychology, but not, just the one class in college. So I wanted to do that amount of research. I wanted to speak to people in that field. So start with research. So I start with secondary and primary. So the secondary research is more so the research that's already been completed by everyone else. And I'm gathered and organized articles. I'm just researching that. And then I do primary research for our community. So I reach out to people and I give them a survey. And I really try to understand that part of it, of the mental health. So I did do that in about 2020. I passed that survey out for about 6 months and tried to reach as many people as possible. So after I have the research, I then go into the design thinking theory or process. People have different names for it. Yeah. So for the process, I start with empathy. So learning about the audience, that will go back to the surveys and really speaking to them. Then I try to really define the problem statements or the pain points. And then, I also do brainstorming and make mind maps for the next stage. And then I make prototypes, and then I test it in samples, and it usually forms on from there. But that's usually the process that I do. It's kind of really long, but I feel in the end it's worth it because you can really see it. See the difference.
No wonder why your designs stand out, because your process is so extensive and you do your research so thoroughly. So no wonder they stand out and they're so special. So,
thank you.
How has socioeconomic and diversity inspired you to create your products, and the impact the brand has created over the years? How would you like to explain?
Definitely. I'm sorry for cutting you off there. But socioeconomics and that whole aspect has always been a huge part of my life, and I know many others. So the focusing on relationship of social behavior versus economics, I think the correlation between the two is so heavy, but it's not really spoken about, I feel like, in our community. So I really wanted to bring a voice to that and to include that in my brand's DNA. So as I mentioned before, in my design process, I do start with a mind map. So like one bubble in the middle, and then I branch out. My last collection actually started at social economics, and then it branched out to different things, different feelings that you get in that situation. And eventually it led to mental health and a few other things. But I stuck on mental health because this was in the middle of the pandemic. I was isolated designing the collection, and I just thought this is the time, and when I'm done with it, it'll still be the time. So that's why I decided to do a mental health collection focused on that. But it did stem from social economics.
I think the culture and also like where you come from, it plays a big role in like when we go through the learning process and we finally get a chance to create our own collection. So that's really great that you have taken inspiration from different elements of your own life.
Definitely.
And created a collection that inspires others too. And we would also like to know like what are like some of the challenges that you had faced as a sustainability luxury brand today in today's market.
Yes, definitely. So Well, one pain point currently, and I feel like it's going to happen until you hit a certain price point with your brand, but designing sustainably is not cheap.
Yeah.
So you have to have a certain amount of capital.
Yeah.
But I think in the end it's worth it. And I also think I've seen this for a few other designers. I cannot remember their name off the top of my head, but they were just in the news and someone was bashing them, saying that they don't have enough products available. But they are a small, emerging, luxury, sustainable brand. So they have limited quantity to give. So they were complaining about that. And I'm just like,
That's not how it works. Yeah.
yeah, it's not how it works. It's not a fast fashion brand, so they don't have what H&M has to push out hundreds of T-shirts.
Right.
You know, there's
It's
a
not
limited amount of
mass
quantity.
production, yeah.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said it's not mass production. Sustainability is
Yeah.
not supposed to be mass produced.
Yeah, and it's something that is handcrafted with a lot of love and a lot of patience and a lot
Yeah.
of research.
And
like we
it's
discussed.
all about doing things mindfully. How can you create? You're talking about capsule collection and then creating, mass producing. It wouldn't make sense, no.
Yeah.
I agree. So when I saw that, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's not fast fashion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one of the difficulties. And I don't want to produce 5,000 T-shirts.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Even if they are priced higher, they're going to end up where they end up in a landfill.
Yeah.
So there's no point in producing that much. And there are so many designers. We each don't have to produce like 10,000 T-shirts, because there are people producing 10,000 T-shirts,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of wild. But yeah, so that's one of the main pain points, I would say, being a sustainable luxury designer.
Yeah, we totally get you. Like, we believe that it's very important to educate the audience, because there is so much less of awareness. People do not completely understand the meaning of sustainability. And from our end, as we all come from fashion industry, we try to give our best to explain them what it means. And it's not about just buying certain fabrics or buying product from sustainable brand, but it is also about what you already have and reusing it, and using it in several different ways. So yeah, we get where you are coming from and how much it must be difficult for you to explain your audience and then educate them through your collection.
Definitely. We actually try to do Sustainable Monday and Mental Health Mondays on our stories, because that's a way we reach out to our audience to educate them. But I also feel like for the audience that they're new to sustainability and the whole idea of it, I feel like it's at this time, since everyone's adding sustainability to their brand, I can understand the confusion that a lot of people are getting. So I think education, that's why we have like the Sustainable Sunday on our brand's page, to try to educate and to provide those resources for people so they can read up on it and know that. So
yeah, that's a nice initiative. Really appreciate it. So with your recent collection, Mental Health, that looks very interesting, very intriguing, probably one of our favorite collections. So could you talk more about it?
Yes, so the Mental Health collection, so in terms of inspiration or?
Inspiration, and how did this idea came to your mind?
Yeah, you can explain us the whole process. We would just love to know everything about it.
Okay, so in I think around 2020, January, right before the pandemic had hit, I had a different idea for the collection. I can't even remember it now, but it wasn't going to be mental health. But then just the atmosphere and the situation, because right around lockdown, the George Floyd tragedy happened back to back. So it's like you're locked away. You can't like get to your family, because I was in Paris. So there was a lot of pressure on my mental health. So I think that definitely, like, that was my ultimate decision to go with that, because I know I wasn't the only person feeling like this. So I definitely wanted to do the mental health collection, but I did start with social economics as the middle of my mind map brand DNA. And then I got to mental health and decided to go with mental health just because of the climate that we're in. It was pretty rough, a lot of protests at that time.
Right.
So that was my main inspiration during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement and in the middle of COVID. I just knew everyone's mental health, like leaving this was going to be extremely altered in a positive way or a negative way, but more so I was seeing the negative of it just because of how intense it was. And I grew a lot of inspiration from that. Well, actually designing, like when I actually put pen to paper after all of the research that I mentioned I do, I start to draw, and then I draw to songs that
Interesting.
grasp some of that emotion. So like Bach, Beethoven, Stormé is a French singer. I think I'm saying his name right. I always say it wrong. But he actually did a whole album on, it wasn't mental health, but it was the state of his mental health. So I drew to that, and that was a lot of inspiration. But so people always ask me, how is this a mental health collection? And I think for every stage, I actually have over 800 sketches from this collection, but you guys only see 10.
Oh my god, that's a long process with like so much of sketching and ideating.
Yes. So my whole wall, I'll share a picture with you girls.
Yeah, I
and
would love to see.
even if you can share the playlist of the artists that you mentioned, maybe we can use it to showcase while like we are working on the creatives. That
would be
great.
lovely. Yeah.
Okay, definitely. I'll put that in there. But yeah, so I have my whole wall in Paris of my apartment covered with sketches, hundreds of sketches. And people always ask me, how is this a mental health collection? I'll go back to that. And for each segment of mental health, for example, the first contemplation stage, I try to put myself in that stage, and I use information from the research notes of how people would feel. And then I pick a song that reflects that, if that makes sense. And then just like a artist would paint or sculpt, and then I blast the music and I just draw to that one feeling. Hundreds of sketches, and then I put that section away, and then I try to go through every stage of it.
Amazing.
Yeah,
That's great. I think how emotion drives the collection, that's really great.
It actually reminds me of our basic design classes. Do you remember when we used to paint on music? Like our faculty would play the music, and we had to draw or based on that music, whatever emotions we were
felt like.
That point of time. It was so interesting. Favorite. That used to be my favorite class. So one song, but everyone had different emotions.
And colors.
Some would feel happy after listening to that song, and some would feel sad or depressed. And that was very interesting to see, like to experience.
I love that.
Yeah,
I would love that class.
So your process actually reminds me of that class.
Pretty interesting. So we would definitely like our audience to see more of your collection and get in touch with you to know more about your products. So where can they find you and your products?
Definitely. So you can go to our Instagram at Corii Burns. So it's CORIIBURNS, or www.CorieBurns.com.
Okay, perfect. And of course your Instagram is also there, so we will link those in our podcast, and we'll put that on our Instagram as well. Is there anything else that we missed, or you want to cover in today's interview, or you want to talk about?
So I do have a handbag coming out this April, so I'm super excited about that.
Nice. We would love to see, like, it's coming in April?
Yes, in April.
Amazing. Great. We would love to see. We'll keep our eyes on.
On your page.
Thank you.
Great. Cool. So, on this note, on behalf of our podcast audience, we would like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this interview with us. It was a pleasure to have you on, and we are so excited to see the amazing brand like yours in the space of sustainability, working with deconstruction and upcycling concepts. Thank you so much for joining us today, Corii.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.